The conference room was silent. Kate Morrison sat at the long table, her hands folded in front of her. She had waited 3 months for this moment, Earth's first chance to join the Galactic Council. After 200 years of knowing aliens existed, humanity finally had a seat at the table. Across from her sat 12 representatives from different worlds. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Kate had to remind herself not to stare. One being seemed to be made of living crystal. Another looked like a floating cloud of gas held together by a suit. The diversity was amazing and terrifying at the same time. Speaker Velrix, the crystal being, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. A translator device turned his words into English. He was ancient, older than any human civilization. His species had been traveling the stars when humans were still learning to make fire. Dr. Alan Foster sat next to Kate. He was nervous. She could see his knee bouncing under the table. Alan was a scientist who studied old human history and stories from different cultures. He had spent years learning everything he could about alien civilizations. Now he was finally meeting them. The meeting seemed routine at first. Kate presented Earth's request. She talked about humanity's achievements. She mentioned their technology, their culture, their desire for peace. She showed images of Earth, the blue planet that humans called home. She explained how humans had finally united after centuries of war and conflict. The council members listened politely. Some took notes. Others simply watched with eyes that seemed to see through her. Kate felt like they were judging not just her words, but humanity itself. Every species that wanted to join the council had to go through this process. It was standard procedure, nothing to worry about. Then archivist Jen spoke up. The mycelian researcher looked like a walking mushroom covered in bioluminescent spots that glowed softly in the dim light. Jen's job was to check Earth against the Council's historical records. Every planet, every species, every star system was documented in the ancient database. It was a collection of knowledge spanning millions of years. Jen activated a holographic display. Numbers and symbols filled the air above the table. Alan leaned forward, trying to understand the alien script. Kate watched as Jen entered Earth's coordinates into the system. It should have been simple. A new entry for a new species joining the galactic community. But something went wrong. The display flickered. Red symbols appeared. An alarm sound filled the room. Jen's glowing spots pulsed rapidly, indicating surprise or distress. The other council members shifted in their seats. Some leaned closer to see the display. Others pulled back slightly. Kate felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Speaker Velrix's crystal body changed color, shifting from clear to a dark purple. Alan had studied enough alien behavior to know what that meant. Fear. The ancient being was afraid. Jen spoke, but his voice was different now, quieter, more careful. The translator rendered his words slowly, as if it was struggling with what it heard. Earth was already in the database, not as a new entry, but as an old one, very old. The record dated back hundreds of thousands of years, long before humans had built cities or written language. Kate glanced at Alan. He looked as confused as she felt. How could Earth be in records that old? Humans had only been a spacefaring species for a few centuries. They had only known about aliens for 200 years. This made no sense, Jen continued. Earth had a name in the old language, a name given to it by civilizations that had long since turned to dust. The mycelian struggled to translate it. The words came out broken, uncertain. Other council members offered their own interpretations. Each translation was slightly different, but they all carried the same meaning. The same terrible meaning. The cradle of rage. The wrathborn world. The place where violence dreams. Different words, same message. Earth was known. Earth was feared. And humanity, sitting there in that conference room asking to join the peaceful galactic community, had no idea why. Speaker Velrix stood. His massive form towered over the table. When he spoke, every translator in the room broadcast his words. This meeting was over. Kate and Alan were to remain in their quarters while the council investigated. They were not prisoners, Velrix insisted, but they were not free to leave either. As security escorted them out, Kate heard the council members arguing. Their voices rose in multiple languages, creating a symphony of concern and fear. She caught fragments through the translator. Words like dangerous, ancient, and threat kept repeating. Back in their assigned rooms, Alan paced back and forth. His scientific mind raced through possibilities. Some ancient civilization must have lived on Earth before humans. Maybe they were intelligent dinosaurs. Maybe they were visitors from another world who stayed for a while. Maybe the records were simply wrong, but Kate remembered the look on Velrix's face. The color of his crystal body, that was not the reaction to a simple mistake or an interesting historical footnote. That was genuine fear. And if beings who had lived for thousands of years were afraid, humanity had a serious problem. 3 days passed. Kate and Alan remained in their quarters. They had access to food and entertainment, but they were isolated. No communication with Earth, no contact with the Council. They waited, wondering what was happening in those closed-door meetings. On the 4th day, Archivist Jen visited them. The mycelium looked tired, his bioluminescent spots dim. He carried a data tablet filled with images and text. He had spent the last 3 days in the deepest parts of the archives, searching for information about Earth. What he found changed everything. Earth appeared in dozens of ancient records. Different civilizations, different time periods, all mentioning the third planet of the Sol system. They spoke of a species that lived there. A species so fierce, so violent, so perfectly adapted for war that they dominated every battlefield they entered. These beings were not invaders or conquerors in the traditional sense. They did not build empires. They simply fought. Fighting was their nature, their purpose, their reason for existing, and they were unmatched. No army could stand against them. No warrior could defeat them. They were born for battle, then mysteriously they vanished. The records simply stopped mentioning them. No great war destroyed them. No plague wiped them out. They just disappeared, leaving behind only their reputation and the fear they had inspired across the galaxy. Kate asked the obvious question. What did this have to do with humans? Jen's spots pulsed slowly. That was what the Council was trying to determine. Were humans the descendants of these ancient warriors? Had they inherited that violent nature? Or were humans a completely different species that happened to evolve on the same world? Alan pulled up Earth's history on his own tablet. He showed Jen images of human warfare, thousands of years of conflict, weapons that could destroy entire cities, recent wars that had killed millions. He did not try to hide the truth. Humanity had a violent past. They were still violent in many ways, but they were also capable of peace, Alan insisted. Humans created art and music. They wrote poetry and told stories. They loved and laughed and dreamed. They were more than just warriors. They were complex, contradictory, capable of both terrible cruelty and incredible kindness. Jen listened carefully. Then he showed them one more record, a warning carved in stone and digitized for the archives. It was written in a language so old that even the best scholars could barely translate it. But the message was clear enough. A prediction or perhaps a curse. The inhabitants of the Wrathborn world would return. And when they did, the galaxy would tremble. Kate felt cold. Humanity's application to join the Galactic Council had uncovered something they were never meant to know. A secret buried in time, a reputation written in the stars. Earth was not just another planet. It was legendary, and legends, especially ones built on fear, were hard to escape. The galaxy had not forgotten Earth, and now that humans had returned to space, reaching out to their neighbors among the stars, that old fear was awakening. Kate looked at Alan. He looked back at her. Neither spoke, but both understood. Everything had changed. Humanity's future among the stars would be shaped by a past they did not remember, and a reputation they did not earn. The Council's decision would come soon. But Kate already knew the answer. They would not simply accept humanity. They could not. The fear was too old, too deep. Humanity would have to prove themselves. They would have to show the galaxy who they really were, and that terrified Kate more than anything else, because deep down, she was not sure what that proof would reveal. The archives stretched deeper than Kate had imagined. Archivist Jen led her and Alan through corridors lined with data storage units. Some were modern, glowing with soft blue light. Others looked ancient, carved from stone or grown from living crystal. Each contained the memories of civilizations long dead. The Council had granted them limited access. Kate suspected this was a test. They wanted to see how humans would react to the truth about their world. Would they deny it? Embrace it? Would they become afraid of themselves? The answers to these questions would help determine humanity's fate. Jen stopped at a particularly old section. The walls here were made of black stone covered in symbols that seemed to move in the dim light. The mycelian placed his hand against the surface. The stone responded, opening to reveal a chamber filled with holographic projectors. Images filled the air. Battle scenes from wars fought before human civilization existed. Kate saw creatures fighting with weapons and tactics she recognized. Flanking maneuvers, ambush tactics, psychological warfare. These were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent, strategic, and terrifyingly effective. Alan studied the images carefully. He was a scientist, trained to observe without emotion, but Kate could see his hands shaking slightly. The resemblance was undeniable. The creatures in the ancient records stood upright on two legs. They had 2 arms, 2 eyes, a similar body structure. They were not human, but they could have been human ancestors. Jen explained what the record said. These beings called themselves many names in many languages, but other species had a simpler term for them: the Terrors. They did not seek conquest. They did not build empires or gather wealth. They simply existed in a state of constant warfare, fighting each other when no other enemies could be found. Yet they were not savages. They had technology, culture, even art. But everything in their civilization revolved around combat. Their poetry was about war. Their music was battle hymns. Their greatest achievements were measured in victories won and enemies defeated. Fighting was not something they did. It was what they were. Kate asked the question that had been bothering her. If these beings were so powerful, so undefeatable, what happened to them? Where did they go? Jen's bioluminescent spots dimmed. That was the mystery. Every record simply stopped at a certain point. No final battle. No catastrophe. Just silence. Alan suggested several theories. Maybe they destroyed themselves in a civil war. Maybe they evolved beyond violence. Maybe they left Earth to explore other galaxies. But Jen shook his head. The archives contained records of alien expeditions sent to investigate. Over the millennia, dozens of species had tried to study Earth or claim it for themselves. None of those expeditions ever returned. The pattern was consistent. A species would discover Earth. They would send explorers or colonists. The ships would arrive in the Sol system. Then nothing. No distress signals. No final transmissions. The ships and their crews simply vanished. After enough disappearances, the galactic community declared Earth forbidden territory. No one was allowed to go there. Kate felt sick. Was Earth some kind of death trap? Did something on the planet kill anyone who approached? Or was something worse happening? She thought about human history, about all the stories of missing expeditions and lost colonies. Were those disappearances connected to this ancient curse? Jen showed them more records. These were different. They were warnings written by the few survivors who managed to escape Earth's gravity well before disappearing. The messages were fragmentary and often contradictory, but certain themes repeated. Feelings of being watched, sounds in the darkness, shadows that moved wrong, and anger. Overwhelming, consuming anger that seemed to seep up from the ground itself. One survivor, a member of a species that communicated through color changes, described Earth as a world that breathed rage. Another, a telepathic being, wrote about hearing screams in their mind whenever they touched the soil. A third spoke of dreams filled with violence and blood. All agreed on one thing. Earth was not empty. Something still lived there waiting. Alan pulled up his own data. He showed Jen information about human evolution, about how humans developed from earlier primates over millions of years. He explained the fossil record, the genetic evidence, the clear line of ancestry connecting modern humans to ancient apes. Humans were not aliens. They evolved on Earth naturally, but Jen was not convinced. He displayed another set of records. These documented the biological traits of the ancient terrors. Strong endurance, excellent pattern recognition, ability to digest a wide variety of foods, capacity to survive in diverse climates, social structure based on complex hierarchies. Every trait matched human capabilities exactly. Kate understood what Jen was implying. What if humans were not a separate species? What if they were the terrors evolved and changed over hundreds of thousands of years? What if the disappearances happened because the ancient inhabitants never left? They just transformed into something new, something that looked peaceful but carried violence in their very DNA. The three of them returned to the main archive hall. Kate needed time to think. Alan needed time to process. Even Jen seemed overwhelmed by the implications of what they had found. If humans truly were descendants of the Terrors, then every fear the Council had was justified. Humanity was not just another species. They were the return of the galaxy's worst nightmare. News of the discovery spread quickly. Within days, every species in the Council knew about Earth's true name. Reactions varied wildly. Some called for immediate action against humanity. Others urged caution and further investigation. A few saw opportunity, wondering if humanity's nature could be controlled or directed toward useful purposes. Speaker Velrix called an emergency session. Kate was required to attend, but she was not allowed to speak. She sat in the gallery and watched as representatives argued about humanity's fate. The Zerathian delegate demanded that humans be quarantined on Earth, prevented from spreading into the galaxy. The risk was too great, they argued. History had proven what Earth's children were capable of. The Talvexian representative disagreed. He pointed out that humans had achieved peace among themselves. They had created the United Earth government, ending centuries of nation-state conflicts. They had developed art, science, and philosophy. Whatever they once were, they had clearly evolved beyond simple violence. Judging them by ancient history was unfair and unscientific. But the Corvathian elder raised another concern. Yes, humans had achieved peace, but how? Through deterrence. Through weapons so terrible that using them meant mutual destruction. Human peace was not built on trust or understanding. It was built on fear, the same fear that the ancient terrors had inspired. Violence controlled by the threat of greater violence. Kate wanted to defend her species. She wanted to explain that humans were more than their worst moments, but she had no platform, no voice in this debate. She could only watch as her people's future was decided by beings who had already made up their minds. Fear was a powerful force, and fear of humans was spreading like a virus through the galactic community. After hours of debate, Velrix called for a recess. The council needed time to consider all options. Kate was escorted back to her quarters. Alan joined her soon after. He looked exhausted. The scientist in him wanted to prove the council wrong, to find evidence that humans were different from the ancient terrors. But the realist in him saw the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. That night, Kate could not sleep. She lay in bed thinking about Earth. She thought about human history, about all the wars and conflicts that had shaped civilization. She thought about the soldiers she had known, people who volunteered to fight and die for causes they believed in. She thought about humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction. Maybe the council was right to be afraid. Humans were violent. That was undeniable. But they were also capable of controlling that violence, of choosing when to fight and when to make peace. Did that make them better than the ancient terrors? Or did it make them more dangerous? A warrior who could think strategically, plan carefully, and wait patiently was far more threatening than one who simply attacked on instinct. The next morning brought unexpected news. The council had made a decision, but not the one Kate expected. Instead of quarantine or acceptance, they proposed a third option, a test. Humanity would be given an opportunity to prove their worth, to show the galaxy what they truly were. If they passed, they would gain council membership with full rights and privileges. If they failed, Earth would be isolated forever. Kate felt both relief and dread. A test meant a chance, but it also meant risk. What kind of test would the council devise? What would they ask humans to do? And more importantly, what would happen if humanity revealed their true nature in the process? The answer came quickly. The test would be one of combat. The galaxy was facing a threat that no military had been able to stop. If humans truly were the descendants of the terrors, then perhaps they were the only ones who could save the council from destruction. Kate understood the terrible logic. The council was gambling with humanity's future. If humans won, they proved they were valuable allies. If they lost, the problem of what to do with Earth's children would be solved permanently. Either way, the council would learn the truth about humanity, and the galaxy would finally know if the scourge was unlike anything the galaxy had faced in living memory. They appeared 6 months ago at the edge of known space, consuming everything in their path. Planets, ships, stations. Nothing survived their advance. They were a hive mind, billions of individual organisms acting as one terrifying entity. The council had sent their best fleets to stop them. The results were catastrophic. The Scourge adapted to every tactic, learned from every battle, and grew stronger with each victory. They took the wreckage of destroyed ships and incorporated it into their own forces. They captured technology and made it their own. Fighting them was like fighting an enemy that became smarter every time you attacked. Kate stood on the bridge of the Defiant Legacy, watching the main view screen. Captain Ryan Brooks stood next to her, his arms crossed, his expression grim. Behind them, the crew worked at their stations, preparing for a battle that might be their last. The first expeditionary fleet had arrived at the war zone 2 hours ago. What they saw defied description. The Scourge filled the void of space like a living darkness. Their ships were organic, grown rather than built. They pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, communicating in ways that human sensors could barely detect. And they were massive. The smallest Scourge vessel was larger than Earth's biggest battleship. The largest one stretched for kilometers, floating fortresses of flesh and technology. Admiral Claire Jensen commanded the fleet from the carrier Redemption. She was a veteran of the Martian Independence War, known for unconventional tactics and aggressive strategies. General Marcus Hayes coordinated with ground forces, though there would be no ground combat here. This was a space battle, pure and simple, win or die. The Council observers watched from a safe distance. They had their own ships stationed well behind the battle zone, ready to witness humanity's test. Kate wondered what they expected to see. Did they hope humans would win? Or did they secretly want the Scourge to destroy Earth's fleet, eliminating the threat humanity represented? Ryan gave the order. The fleet moved forward in formation. 50 ships, representing humanity's best technology and bravest warriors. Against them, thousands of Scourge vessels. The odds were absurd. But humans had faced bad odds before. Their entire history was built on surviving situations that should have killed them. The first exchange was brutal. The Scourge attacked with coordinated precision. Their weapons fired beams of concentrated energy that cut through shields like paper. Human ships returned fire with missiles, railguns, and energy weapons. Explosions lit up the darkness. Ships on both sides died in the opening minutes, but humans did something the Scourge did not expect. Instead of retreating when damaged, human ships pressed forward. When a vessel lost shields, it accelerated into the enemy formation, using itself as a weapon. When weapons failed, crews detonated their reactors, taking Scourge ships with them in nuclear fire. It was not tactical brilliance. It was desperation and fury mixed together. Lieutenant Nina Parker coordinated the fighter wings. Small, fast ships that darted between the larger vessels, striking at weak points and drawing enemy fire. She was young, barely 25, but she flew like someone who had nothing to lose. Her squadron followed her lead, making impossible maneuvers, taking ridiculous risks, and somehow surviving. Chief Engineer Victor Lane worked miracles in the Defiant Legacy's engine room. When the main reactor overheated, he vented it into space and switched to auxiliary power. When the weapons systems failed, he rerouted power from life support. The crew was cold and breathing thin air, but the guns kept firing. That was all that mattered. The Council observers recorded everything. They saw human tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Nuclear weapons used without hesitation. Ships deliberately collided with enemies. Suicide runs that destroyed multiple Scourge vessels at the cost of a single human ship. It was savage, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. But what shocked the observers most was the human communications. They expected to hear fear, panic, desperation. Instead, they heard laughter, war cries, soldiers shouting encouragement to each other even as they died. One pilot, moments before his ship exploded, transmitted a message. His exact words were recorded for the archives. He said he was having the time of his life. Kate watched the battle unfold and felt something twist inside her. Pride and horror mixed together. These were her people. Brave, reckless, completely insane. They were facing certain death and treating it like a game. No, not a game. Something deeper, something primal. They were not fighting because they had to. They were fighting because some part of them wanted to. The battle raged for 3 weeks. Human losses mounted. Ships were destroyed. Crews died. But the Scourge advance stopped. For the first time since they appeared, the hive mind was forced to pause. They had never encountered resistance like this. Other species fought to survive. Humans fought like they enjoyed it. Admiral Jensen developed a strategy. She noticed that the Scourge learned quickly but forgot slowly. They adapted to tactics but took time to share that knowledge across the hive mind. So she rotated her approach constantly, never used the same attack twice, kept them off balance, forced them to relearn every lesson over and over. General Hayes suggested something even more aggressive. Use psychological warfare. The Scourge was a hive mind, but that meant every organism was connected. If they could traumatize one part of the Scourge, that trauma would spread. So human forces started broadcasting images and sounds during battle, war drums, screaming. Recordings of human history's bloodiest conflicts. It worked. The Scourge began making mistakes. They hesitated when they should have attacked. They retreated when victory was within reach. The hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before. Fear. Not the simple survival instinct of a prey animal. Something deeper. The recognition that they had met something more dangerous than themselves. Ryan led the final assault. The Defiant Legacy and 7 surviving ships pushed deep into Scourge territory. Their target was the central hive ship, a massive structure that coordinated the entire swarm. Destroying it would not kill the Scourge, but it would break their unity, scatter them, buy time for the galaxy to recover. The hive ship was protected by thousands of smaller vessels. Getting close was suicide. Ryan knew it. His crew knew it. They went anyway. Kate tried to convince him to wait for reinforcements, to develop a better plan. He smiled and told her that humans were not good at waiting. Better to die trying than live wondering. The assault was chaos. Ships exploded around the Defiant Legacy. Ryan's pilot, a woman named Sophie Grant, flew through debris fields and weapon fire with impossible skill. Victor kept the engines running even as systems failed throughout the ship. Nina's fighters cleared a path, sacrificing themselves to protect the flagship. They reached the hive ship. Ryan ordered all remaining missiles fired at once. The entire payload, everything they had left. The missiles penetrated the organic hull and detonated inside. The hive ship shuddered. Alarms filled the Defiant Legacy's bridge. They were too close. The explosion would kill them too. Ryan gave the order to retreat, but it was too late. The hive ship was breaking apart. Pieces of it crashed into the Defiant Legacy, tearing through armor and hull. The bridge lost atmosphere. Emergency systems kicked in, but half the crew was already dead. Kate found herself in a survival suit, clinging to her console as the ship spun out of control. Somehow, Sophie got them clear. The Defiant Legacy limped away from the exploding hive ship, trailing debris and venting atmosphere. Behind them, the Scourge fleet began to scatter. Without the hive mind's coordination, they were just individual organisms, confused and directionless. The battle was over. Humanity had won. The cost was terrible. 30 ships destroyed, 20,000 humans dead. The survivors were injured, traumatized, forever changed by what they had experienced. But they had done what the entire galactic military could not. They had stopped the Scourge. Kate floated in the damaged bridge, looking at the stars through a cracked viewport. Around her, rescue ships approached, both human and alien. The Council observers were transmitting reports back to their governments. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had just revealed exactly what they were: not peaceful explorers, not civilized diplomats, warriors, born of rage, shaped by violence, capable of horrors that other species could not imagine. Ryan sat in his command chair, injured but alive. He looked at Kate and she looked back. Neither spoke. What was there to say? They had passed the test. But in doing so, they had confirmed every fear the Council held. Earth's children had returned to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Council chamber was silent when Kate entered. She walked slowly, still recovering from injuries sustained in the battle. Her left arm was in a medical support brace. A scar ran along her cheek where flying debris had cut her. She wore her diplomatic uniform, but it felt wrong now. She was no longer just a diplomat. She was a witness to what her species truly was. The 12 representatives sat in their elevated seats looking down at her. Speaker Velrix's crystal body was dark purple, the color she now recognized as deep fear. Other members displayed their own emotional responses. The Zerathian delegate had retreated partially into its protective shell. The Talvexian representative leaned forward with obvious fascination. Archivist Jen was present too, standing off to the side with a data display. He looked different now. His bioluminescent spots pulsed rapidly, indicating excitement or agitation. Kate realized he had been researching. While the battle raged, Jen had been digging deeper into the archives, looking for answers to questions that suddenly seemed much more urgent. Speaker Velric spoke first. His voice was careful, measured. He acknowledged humanity's victory. 20,000 humans had died, but they had stopped an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. The Council was grateful. The galaxy was saved. But gratitude did not erase fear. If anything, the battle had made things worse. The Council had watched the entire conflict. They had analyzed human tactics, recorded communications, studied the behavior of individual soldiers. What they saw confirmed their worst suspicions. Humans were not just capable of violence. They seemed to thrive on it. They fought with enthusiasm. They made jokes while dying. They celebrated destruction. The Zarathian delegate spoke next, demanding that humanity be quarantined immediately. The test had proven that humans were dangerous. Yes, they had won. But their methods were barbaric. They used tactics that violated every civilized norm. They sacrificed their own people without hesitation. They treated war like sport. Such beings could not be trusted. Kate wanted to defend her people, but she had no words. Everything the Zarathian said was true. She had watched humans laugh as they died. She had heard the war cries and battle songs. She had seen the joy on Ryan's face when he ordered the final assault. Humans were violent. That was not propaganda or misunderstanding. It was fact. Then Jen stepped forward. He asked permission to share his findings. Velrix granted it. The mycelian activated his display, filling the chamber with images from the archives. These were older records, ones that had been hidden or forgotten. Documents that explained the mystery of Earth's ancient inhabitants. The beings called the Terrors did not vanish, Jen explained. They evolved. Over millions of years, they changed. Their bodies became less specialized for pure combat. Their brains grew larger. Their social structures became more complex. But the core remained. The capacity for violence, the love of battle, the willingness to die fighting. Those traits were preserved, encoded in their genetics. Jen showed comparative DNA analyses. Human genetic code contained markers that matched samples taken from ancient Terror remains. The connection was undeniable. Humans were not descendants of the Terrors. They were the Terrors, transformed by evolution into something superficially different but fundamentally the same. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Council. Several delegates stood, demanding to speak. Others withdrew, unwilling to participate in a discussion that now felt dangerous. Kate felt numb. She had suspected this truth, but hearing it confirmed was different. Her species, her people, were the monsters from ancient legends. Every fear was justified, but Jen was not finished. He showed more records, these ones recent. Reports from the battle against the Scourge. Analysis of human behavior, and something unexpected. Evidence that humans were different from the ancient Terrors in crucial ways. They had empathy. They formed bonds across genetic lines. They created art and music not about war, but about love, loss, hope, and beauty. The ancient Terrors fought because that was all they knew. Humans fought because they chose to. That distinction mattered. It meant humans could also choose not to fight. They could control their violent impulses, direct them toward specific purposes, turn them off when necessary. They were not slaves to their nature. They were masters of it. Kate found her voice. She stood before the Council and spoke about humanity's journey. She talked about the wars humans fought against themselves, the terrible lessons they learned, the slow, painful process of building peace. She admitted that humans were violent, but she insisted they were also capable of incredible compassion. She pointed out that humans died protecting alien worlds. They sacrificed themselves for species they had just met. They fought the Scourge not because Earth was threatened, but because other planets were in danger. That was not the behavior of mindless monsters. That was the behavior of beings who understood duty, honor, and justice. The Talvexian representative agreed with Kate. He reminded the Council that every species had darkness in their history. The Talvexians themselves had nearly destroyed their homeworld in nuclear war before achieving peace. The Corvathians had practiced ritual cannibalism for thousands of years. Every civilization carried scars from its past. Humans were no different, but the Corvathian elder raised a concern. Those other species had overcome their darkness. Humans had not. They still maintained massive militaries. They still developed new weapons. They had achieved peace through deterrence, not through genuine change. Their violence was controlled, not eliminated. The capacity remained, waiting for an excuse to emerge. Kate could not argue against that. It was true. Humans had not transcended violence. They had simply learned to manage it. But was that not enough? Did they need to become completely peaceful to deserve acceptance? Or could the galaxy benefit from having warriors who understood restraint? The debate continued for hours. Arguments were made, countered, refined. Facts were presented, analyzed, disputed. Kate stood through it all, her injured arm aching, her body exhausted. But she refused to sit. This was too important. Her species' future hung in the balance. Finally, Speaker Velrix called for order. He had heard enough. The Council would vote on humanity's membership. But first, he wanted to make something clear. The vote was not about whether humans were violent. That was established fact. The vote was about whether that violence could coexist with civilized society. Velrix looked directly at Kate. His crystal body shifted colors, moving from purple to a softer blue. He asked her a question. Could humanity promise to use their power responsibly? Could they guarantee they would not become the threat the ancient terrors represented? Could they live in peace with species weaker than themselves? Kate thought carefully before answering. She could make easy promises, tell comforting lies, but this moment demanded truth. So she spoke honestly. She could not guarantee anything. Humans were flawed, capable of terrible things. But they were also capable of greatness. They had proven they could change, grow, learn. Given the chance, they would prove themselves worthy of trust. She added one more thing. The galaxy now knew what humans were. They could choose to embrace that or reject it. But the choice should be based on who humans were now, not who their ancestors were millions of years ago. Judge them by their actions, not their genetics. Give them the same chance every other species received. Velrix nodded slowly. He ordered the council to prepare for the vote. Kate was escorted from the chamber. She stood outside, waiting with Alan, who had been watching from a separate gallery. He looked shaken. He had heard everything, learned the truth about human origins. His scientific understanding of evolution had been turned into a horror story. They waited for hours. No word came from inside. The vote was taking time, which meant it was close. A unanimous decision would have been quick. Division meant debate, negotiation, compromise. Kate tried to stay hopeful, but fear gnawed at her. What if the council rejected humanity? What would Earth do? Accept isolation? Or prove the council right by responding with force? Finally, the doors opened. An assistant summoned Kate back inside. The vote was complete. The decision had been made. Kate entered the chamber one more time, her heart pounding. She looked at the council members, trying to read their expressions. But alien faces were hard to interpret. She had no idea what was coming. Speaker Velrix stood. His crystal body glowed with colors Kate had never seen before. He spoke slowly, ensuring every word was translated perfectly. The council had voted to grant humanity membership. But the decision came with conditions. Strict ones. Humanity would join the galactic community, but they would do so under observation. They would serve as protectors, but they would be watched carefully. One mistake, one violation, and everything would end. Kate felt relief and anxiety in equal measure. They had won. Humanity would join the council. But the victory was conditional, fragile. The galaxy's trust had to be earned, maintained, protected. One wrong move and Earth's children would become outcast forever. The responsibility was crushing, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to prove that even monsters could choose to be heroes. 5 years had passed since the Battle of the Scourge. Kate stood once again before the Galactic Council. But the room felt different now. The tension was still present, but it had changed. Fear remained, but it was tempered by something else. Respect. Cautious, grudging, but genuine. Earth had sent its first official report as a full council member. Kate held the data tablet containing humanity's record over the past 5 years. Numbers and statistics that told a story of sacrifice, duty, and constant vigilance. The galaxy had given humans a chance. Now she had to prove they had not wasted it. Speaker Velrix invited her to present. His crystal body was light blue now, a color that meant calm attention. Kate approached the center of the chamber and activated her display. Images and data filled the holographic space above her. She began with the simple facts. Human forces had responded to 47 separate threats across Council space: pirates attacking trade routes, territorial disputes between minor species, natural disasters requiring evacuation assistance, and 3 major military conflicts where hostile forces threatened established worlds. In every case, human intervention had been decisive. 17 worlds now existed because of human protection. Billions of beings owed their lives to Earth's soldiers. But the cost was high. 50,000 humans had died in various conflicts. Ships were destroyed. Families lost loved ones. Earth's military was stretched thin, covering vast regions of space with limited resources. Kate showed images of human bases established on frontier worlds. Fortified stations where Earth's defenders waited, watching for threats. She showed recordings of human soldiers training with alien allies, sharing tactics and building trust. She showed hospitals where human doctors treated injured beings from dozens of different species. But she also showed the incidents. 3 times human forces had used excessive violence. 2 commanders had been court-martialed for war crimes. In one case, human soldiers had destroyed a civilian settlement while pursuing hostile forces. These mistakes had been investigated, punished, and used as lessons. But they had happened. Kate did not hide them. The council listened carefully. Some members took notes. Others watched Kate's expression, looking for signs of deception or pride. But she maintained her diplomatic composure. She was reporting facts, not making excuses. Humanity had done good work. They had also made mistakes. Both were true. The Talvexian representative asked about human expansion. How many new colonies had Earth established? Kate answered honestly. 12. All in previously uninhabited systems, all with council approval. Human population was growing and they needed space, but they followed the rules, requested permission, and stayed within their allocated territory. The Zerathian delegate asked about military development. What new weapons had humans created? Kate explained the new ship classes, the improved shields, the enhanced weapon systems. Nothing that violated council restrictions. Everything designed for defense, not conquest. But the technology was advanced. Humans learned quickly, especially when it came to warfare. Archivist Jen raised a different concern. Reports indicated that some species were beginning to worship humans. Small religious cults had formed, calling humans the warriors of light or the galaxy's sword. These groups saw humanity's violence as divine, a force for cosmic justice. This was dangerous. History showed that when species were elevated to mythological status, conflict inevitably followed. Kate acknowledged the problem. Earth's government had issued statements discouraging such worship. Human commanders were instructed to maintain professional distance from the populations they protected, but controlling how others perceived humanity was difficult. The reputation built on fear could not be easily dismantled. Speaker Velrix asked the crucial question. Did humanity still want to be part of the council? 5 years of constant warfare, of serving as the galaxy's protectors, of being simultaneously needed and feared. Was this the future humans envisioned when they first reached for the stars? Kate paused before answering. She thought about the people she had met over the past 5 years. Admiral Jensen, now commanding the entire defense fleet, exhausted but determined. General Hayes, coordinating ground forces across a dozen worlds, dealing with constant emergencies. Captain Brooks, recovered from his injuries but forever changed by the Scourge battle. She thought about the families of the dead, the parents who lost children, the children who lost parents. She thought about the soldiers still serving, still fighting, still risking everything for species they barely knew. The cost was terrible. The burden was immense. But humanity was not backing down. Kate answered simply. Yes. Humanity wanted to remain in the council. This was their purpose now. They had discovered what they were, what Earth had made them. Instead of denying it or fearing it, they chose to embrace it. They would be the galaxy's warriors, not conquerors, defenders, guardians standing against darkness so others could live in light. The council members exchanged glances. Private communications flowed between them, too fast for the translators to catch. Kate waited, knowing this was another test. Every report, every appearance, every interaction was evaluated. Humanity lived under constant scrutiny and would for generations. Finally, Velrix spoke. He acknowledged humanity's contributions. He praised their courage and mourned their losses. He admitted the council had doubts when Earth first joined. Those doubts remained, but they were balanced now by appreciation. The galaxy was safer because humans stood watch. But Velrix added a warning. Humanity walked a dangerous path. Their nature made them effective warriors, but it also made them dangerous. If they ever turned their power against the Council, if they ever decided to conquer rather than protect, the galaxy would have no defense. Every species understood this. The trust extended to humanity was fragile, conditional, and could be revoked at any moment. Kate accepted the warning. She promised that Earth understood the responsibility they carried. She promised they would continue to prove themselves worthy of trust. She promised they would never forget what was at stake. These were not empty words. They were vows backed by the blood of 50,000 dead and the vigilance of millions still serving. The formal meeting concluded, but Kate remained to speak with individual council members. Some expressed genuine gratitude. The Corvathian elder showed her images of their homeworld, now protected by human patrols. The Mycelian colonies sent gifts, artistic representations of human defenders as guardians of life. Others remained distant, polite but wary. Jen approached her privately after the session ended. He had more information to share, research he had been conducting over the past 5 years. He wanted to understand why evolution had preserved humanity's violent nature. What advantage did it provide? Why had other intelligent species moved away from aggression while humans retained it? His conclusion was fascinating and terrifying. Earth was a violent world. Harsh climates, dangerous predators, constant environmental challenges. Humans evolved to survive conditions that would destroy most species. Their aggression was not a flaw. It was an adaptation, and that adaptation made them uniquely suited for a specific role in the galactic ecosystem. Kate understood what Jen was suggesting. Humanity was not meant to be peaceful explorers or gentle philosophers. They were meant to be warriors. The galaxy needed beings who could face horror without flinching, who could fight impossible battles and somehow win. Earth had produced exactly that species. Whether by chance or design, humans existed to stand between civilization and chaos. She returned to Earth a week later. The planet looked beautiful from orbit, a blue marble floating in the darkness. Home. But also the Wrathborn world, the cradle of rage, the place where monsters learned to be heroes. Kate wondered what ancient beings had walked these continents, what battles they fought, what dreams they held. She met with human leadership. President Helen Cruz listened to Kate's report with careful attention. The political situation on Earth was complex. Some people celebrated humanity's role as protectors. Others questioned the cost. Protests demanded withdrawal from galactic affairs. Politicians debated military budgets and colonial expansion. Democracy was messy, especially when making decisions about war and peace. But the consensus held. Earth would honor its commitment to the Council, not because they had to, but because it was right. Humanity had a responsibility to use their power wisely. They had learned that lesson through centuries of self-destruction. Now they would apply it on a galactic scale. Kate visited the memorial dedicated to those who died fighting for the Council. 50,000 names carved in black stone. She found Ryan's name among them. He had survived the Scourge battle but died 2 years later defending a colony from raiders. His last transmission talked about duty, honor, and the privilege of protecting those who could not protect themselves. She placed her hand on his name, feeling the cold stone beneath her fingers. Around her, families visited their own lost loved ones. Children too young to remember their parents. Spouses grieving partners, friends mourning companions. The cost of humanity's new role was paid in blood and tears, but it was worth it. Kate believed that. Billions of beings lived because humans fought. Worlds existed because Earth's children stood guard. The galaxy was safer, more peaceful, more hopeful, and all it cost was